afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Economic Development Project team. So I'll call this meeting to order. Commissioners, first item is review and approval of our minutes from our meeting on September 5th. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Any additional questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, that will take us to our discussion of strategy items before we get to our development report. So we'll start with an update on the Development with Us program. We have Ms. Layla with us today.
Hello, thank you for
Hi.
Might as well just-
Okay, thank you for having us. I'm here to give an update on the Development with Us program. We are restarting the pilot program for this fiscal year. So for those of you who need a refresher or weren't here previously when we talked about this, because it was a few years ago, Development with Us is an enhanced community engagement process for projects, select projects that are going to Planning Commission. It is modeled after our Vital Streets program, so it includes a mailer that's sent to people nearby, social media posts, a 311 script, a website, and then a sign on the property for people who may not get the mailer but may pass by. It also includes a meeting facilitated by a third-party facilitator. So the engagement process is voluntary for developers, and it's designed in a way that would not add any length of time to the development process. And right now, planning staff asks the developers of cases that are going to Planning Commission to go out and do engagement with the community, and then before it goes to Planning Commission. So this would be making that engagement consistent, and then us taking on the work of doing that engagement, so there's consistency for the projects that are selected and that are volunteered forth by the developers. This image on the right just shows the development process. So some projects are allowed by right because they are what is in the zoning ordinance as is allowed for that place, spot, and some go through the public hearing. So for this, we're envisioning projects that would go through a public hearing through the Planning Commission, and that's about 10% of projects, and of that, we'd be taking a smaller percentage. So a little background, in 2016, the Urban Core Collective sent a letter to City Commission about their concerns about development within the city, and that led to a working group with city staff and the Urban Core Collective that included a lot of education about development, what the city can control and what can't, the development process, what Planning Commission's role is, topics like that. It led to draft recommendations for this enhanced engagement program, and then we had community feedback sessions. That's what this image is, one of the community feedback sessions with the public. And in 2020, we did a pilot program where we did 2 projects. That unfortunately was ended by the pandemic, and so this fiscal year we're looking to restart that with about 6 projects because we received funding for this in the city budget. So the problem statement, this was developed back when we did that work with the Urban Core Collective. There was a feeling on the behalf of the community and the Urban Core Collective that communities of color were not being engaged proportionally, and that there was inconsistent engagement for projects, and also that there just wasn't a lot of knowledge about the development process and how Planning Commission works. So as a result, this program was developed, and the vision is for a Grand Rapids where residents of all neighborhoods and color are able to participate in the process and give their input. And so the goal is more diverse and equitable representation, a standardized process, and then just an increase of availability about information about these projects. So right now we are recruiting and interviewing third-party facilitators. That was a component that was designed back when we did this work. And so we have one facilitator under contract, Lene Wells. She's here today to talk a little bit about the work she's done. And then we have a meeting next week with about 4 more facilitators. So our goal is to have a group of facilitators that we can call on to assist with these meetings. And having a group is a good idea because people have limited availability, and if one person doesn't work, we can go to somebody else. So this is an example, this image of the sign that we had for one of the projects we did back in 2020. So we've identified one project so far. We're working on some more. This is a project that would likely be going to Planning Commission early next year. It is for 425 and 427 Eastern Avenue. It's a proposal from Guiding Light to have transitional housing, and I'll bring up Lene to talk a little bit more about that project and the work she's done for it so far.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Lene Wells. I'm with Align Planning. I'm a urban planning consultant. I own my own small business. I'm actually MLBE and WBE through the City of Grand Rapids, and I want to thank you all for the assistance that you provided for that registration process. I'm happy to be here and be selected as one of the first facilitators for the reboot of this program. Your planning staff has worked closely with me to ensure that I'm going to come forth as a neutral third party. Part of having a cadre of facilitators means that, you know, if there's a project in a neighborhood where I live, I would gladly bow out and allow someone else to work on that project. I've been working and facilitating with Guiding Light and their consultant team to make sure that they're aware of the planning process, the overall special land use standards, how applications are completed through the city process. And I think one of the benefits that I can help bring to the table is that I've worked on both sides of planning issues. I've written ordinances, I've modified zoning ordinances. I've also worked with developers and the development community. And so I can help navigate the different kind of push and pull that you might see with some of these applications and help the community members learn about planning and our process in general, and then find ways that the applicants and neighbors can come together to find solutions. We're looking at the project, our first public meeting or community meeting being held in January, around January 9th, at a location that's accessible and near the project. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I don't know if I have any questions for you, Ms. Wells, but maybe for Layla. So I am curious, I guess I have a question and then a thought. So I'm curious how projects are identified and selected. Obviously, you mentioned that it's volunteer involvement by the developer, so I'm curious about that. And then I'm also curious how this aligns with where we are with updating the master plan, and then also my hope after the joint meeting with the City Commission and the Planning Commission is that recommendations will come back to this body to try to remove some barriers for infill and have more approvals be administratively approved. And so I'm just curious, how do we balance out wanting to do more engagement around some projects, but then also making the process easier for smaller infill projects?
Right, yes, those are good questions. So right now, we're looking at only cases that go to Planning Commission. So when the planning staff, when a developer comes to planning staff or economic development, they've been a partner in this too, then we'll say, hey, since you have to do engagement anyway, would you like us to take that off your plate and we'll host the meeting and it can go through this process, and they explain a little bit about what it is, and then it's up to the developer. We can't obviously force anyone to go through this process, but we're hoping it'll be enticing because instead of them having to go out and secure a meeting space, figure out how to advertise the meeting, we can take on a lot of that. They are invited to the meeting as well, and we do give them time to share a little bit about what their project is. And we also explain at the meeting what the Planning Commission is basing the standards that they're basing their decision on. So people can't just say, you know, I don't like the color of that building. Well, that unfortunately, Planning Commission doesn't make choices based on that. And how this works with the master plan, yes, like you said, we may have more projects after the master plan is completed and the zoning ordinance is updated going through administrative review by right development. And so those wouldn't be something that would go through this process. This is we're really targeting cases that are going through Planning Commission that need a more discussion with the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful.
And I should say Andrea from Equity and Engagement has been helping us too. Andrea Riley-Mekovitz helping us with finding facilitators.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Commissioners, any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I just think the graphics are super engaging. The sign example that you posted is really neat. And just, it certainly is eye-catching, and if I was walking by, it'd make me want to stop and understand what's going on. So that's great. In terms of translations, I'm just curious, like, is there, like, resources for, like, the Hispanic, community and things of that nature?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking that. So we are planning on having this letter translated into Spanish as well. And then we'd, I think, maybe do Spanish interpretation by request if people want that. Sometimes we have it and then it's not used, so we want to be cognizant of resources.
Yeah, I understand that. That's great, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the signs that are going up are going to be in English and Spanish as well. And we may not do as big of a sign as you saw a picture. That was for like a large vacant lot for kind of like this project that's coming up. That's already an existing building, so we're going to do smaller yard signs.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for this
Okay,
update.
thanks for
Appreciate it.
having me.
Yeah. All right, next that will take us to our update from our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and this is on updating our policy. We'll turn it over to Mr. Klooster, and then also Commissioner Isasi, who serves on our Economic Development Project Team. Oh, I'm sorry, and Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and EDC.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon and give you this update. I'm really going to focus on the things that have been accomplished since the Brownfield Redevelopment Finance Act was amended when that law was signed in July. But I think I'd be remiss to not mention the work that was done in advance of that, starting really in early spring. The work that we did on the legislation in collaboration with, obviously, city staff, Karin Farrick, but also our partners at the Chamber and Housing Next, and other brownfield stakeholders across the state. The work that we did really set us up to be where we are today, as opposed to accepting legislation. We did the work to make sure that what was adopted was consistent with our goals locally and set the stage for us to make quick progress on implementing these changes. And I want to make sure it's clear that while the Brownfield Authority has taken some action, obviously, as you're all aware, brownfield projects come to you as well here at the City Commission. So I want to make sure that there's information shared here. So since the law was signed, we did convene a subcommittee of the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Commissioner Isasi served on that subcommittee. We had 5 members. We did do quite a bit of education. As you may imagine, not everybody there has a lot of background on housing and housing development and finance. And we relied on our partner, Mr. Ryan Kilpatrick at Housing Next, to help us with that and bring a lot of wisdom that he has from his perspective to help set the stage for the Brownfield Authority Subcommittee. And then we worked with them to provide some initial guidance as we began implementing this. I can't stress how significant a change this is to the Brownfield program, the most significant since I've been working with this program in 13 years. And it's a positive change, obviously, but it's very significant. And we wanted to set up some preliminary guide rails for those looking to participate in the program. And to do that, we started by setting our goals, right? Agreeing on these goals. So recognizing that this Housing Tax Increment Finance Program, as it's being referred to, there's a lot of conversation about affordability and income restrictions, but it is also a housing development tool, right? It is about supply of housing in our community. So first goal there, promote new housing development at all price points. I think we're all familiar with that talking point and the importance of new housing development in our community, so that's at the top of the list. There's opportunity. I'll show you some tables here on the next slide, but the Brownfield Authority, because of the mechanism, largely is invested in large multifamily rental development, but there's a great opportunity to expand what we invest into home ownership. There's also a lot of flexibility now to invest in smaller scale projects that just may have qualified but really weren't based on the developer's evaluation. The Brownfield program didn't work for them. And we do want to establish some predictability and expectations. That's critical to all the work we do. We know that lack of predictability can kill a project faster than anything else. So we want to, even as we're learning, working with our state partners, figuring this out as we go to a certain extent, we want to maintain as much predictability as possible here locally. So to the extent we can provide some definitions and some standardization of expectations, we want to do that while still remaining flexible and open to creativity and adaptable as new programs and resources emerge. We don't want to inadvertently create a barrier for the Brownfield Authority and City Commission to participate in a project that will produce the outcomes that we're looking for. So just high level, some of the opportunities that we see really based on the history of the Brownfield program. So over the last 5 years here, you can kind of see the Brownfield Authority has supported a lot of housing development in collaboration with the City Commission. 1,200 units in the last 5 years. It's a big number. It's not nearly enough. And there's opportunity here to expand the type of project that can be supported by the Brownfield Authority. So as I was mentioning, you can just see here visually represented the vast majority on that graph on the left side. The vast majority of projects are rental projects. Most of them are market rate rental, simply because of the financing mechanism, the tax increment financing mechanism. To the extent we can invest in affordable rental, it's generally as gap financing for tax credit projects. The Brownfield program historically by itself is not a significant enough incentive program to support affordable rental or home ownership on its own before this law change. On the right side, again, you see the size of projects that have historically come through the Brownfield Authority and City Commission. Large projects, again, it's a function of the financing mechanism. Smaller projects may be eligible, but in a developer's evaluation, the cost benefit is not there. And so those projects either don't proceed or they find a different way to finance the projects for market rate development. Even those smaller projects below even 20 units have been in just a couple of projects. So really over 5 years, we're talking about 3 projects on a smaller scale. And that's a great opportunity going forward. So I'll, again, try to represent a couple of the very obvious opportunities. It's not comprehensive by any means, but these are the ones that stand out as very obvious opportunities. And I'll go through these individually and sort of identify why these are opportunities that didn't exist before. So on the top left, you're familiar with this project, and the Brownfield Authority did invest in this project. However, if you can imagine this project being on a property that didn't need all of the public infrastructure developed, it would have been a challenge for the Brownfield Authority to invest in that because there would have been very few traditional eligible activities for site preparation and demolition. But now, under the new program, there are very significant opportunities to invest in this project, regardless of what demolition or public infrastructure is required. On the top right, again, this is a project that maybe would have qualified previously, but a developer would have looked at the financial opportunity and probably passed on the program. There were probably not enough eligible activities to justify the time and expense to go through the Brownfield program. That is different now. There will be a large amount of eligible activities, and that is a project that probably could be supported with the Brownfield program, whether it's rental or home ownership. On the bottom left, that image is intended to represent an office to residential conversion. I don't want to represent that this is a silver bullet to that type of project, but in the right circumstances, again, that type of project does not have a lot of traditional brownfield eligible activities. And if there were a certain level of affordability built into a project, the Brownfield Authority could now look at that with a different evaluation. And on the bottom right, what that's trying to represent is a scattered site, smaller scale development. It might be single family homes or maybe duplexes. And again, could be rental or home ownership. Again, not a lot of traditional eligible activities, but probably a project now in the right circumstances that the Brownfield Authority could participate in. So I talked about trying to set up a few guardrails. The law is pretty broad, which is good. And there are aspects of the law that could be interpreted different ways, and that's fine as well. And we wanted to at least take an initial step and publish some guidance for potential applicants to evaluate before looking at the Grand Rapids program. So I'm going to walk through just a couple things here that were determined by the subcommittee as recommendations to put forward initially. And to clarify, these are contained in what we're calling interim guidelines for housing tax increment financing, meaning they are not in policy necessarily. They are guidelines, and what we and our staff are talking about is if these guidelines don't work for your project, we still want to talk to you to understand whether we've set up barriers that we didn't intend to set up. So they are guidelines. The first one we talked about providing a little bit of predictability around for rental projects, what the rental rates can be. So the law provides that the Brownfield Authority can invest in projects that provide some income restricted rental housing. There are different ways to arrive at what that income restriction and the rental rates will be. Because these are traditionally going to be commercially financed and not tax credit financed projects, the predictability that we can provide is that the rental rates will be fixed and not based on a tenant's income. They'll be fixed based on information published by MISHTA every year. That will allow a developer to take a pro forma to a lender with predictability in their revenue streams. I think the other approach, basing the rent on a tenant's income, would really be a barrier to commercially financing these projects. So that's the approach that we're taking in Grand Rapids. We also set up on that next box there, the gray one, we wanted to set an expectation around the amount of income restricted housing that would be required to be included in a project. So for instance, we didn't want a 100-unit development coming with one affordable unit and saying, I want to participate in your income restricted housing program. So again, as a guideline, we established 20% of units as sort of a minimum criteria. We also established that we would want those income restrictions to be in place for no less than 10 years, and that we would not choose, as you are likely aware, the law allows for up to 120% AMI. What we did not do was say Grand Rapids is limiting that to 100 or 80 or 60 or something like that. But we did say the income restricted units must be below market rate. They must be below 120% AMI because the law says so, and they must be below market rate. So that's going to be different depending on where the project is. But we wanted those units to be rented at a rate that was below the market rate for a project. So that means that we'll see projects with 80% AMI, and we'll see projects with 100% AMI, and various iterations of that. I did mention this third thing, home ownership is a huge opportunity for the Brownfield Authority in Grand Rapids. Because of the success of our program over the last 25 years, we have established a local Brownfield revolving fund that currently has about $5 million available. In my previous slide, I showed that the Brownfield Authority has not supported a lot of home ownership. That's largely because of the financing mechanism available through Brownfield, which is a long-term revenue stream. That works when a property is developed based on a cash flow model where a developer is generating income every year. With home ownership, it gets developed and sold, and developers out. So the opportunity to leverage our very significant local Brownfield revolving fund to provide grants or forgivable loans in a short-term investment is a great opportunity to really make progress on affordable home ownership in the near term. So what we've established, again, as preliminary guidelines, trying to limit our investment, trying to make appropriate investments to achieve the outcome here, is that the Brownfield Authority would invest up to $100,000 in a single home ownership unit, or 25% of the cost of that development, whichever is less. So we want to explore opportunities to participate with other programs to drive that number down, develop as much home ownership as possible. But again, because of the the local Brownfield Revolving Fund in Grand Rapids, it's a great opportunity for us to make investments in that in the short term. In order to do that, I'll move on to the fourth bottom left there. We did change the prioritization for the use of the local Brownfield Revolving Fund to a certain extent. We have been running an environmental site assessment grant program that's producing good outcomes. We're going to continue to do that. On my next slide, I'll show you the definition of emerging developers that the Brownfield Authority adopted. So we think there's an opportunity to leverage that fund again to provide flexible financing, pre-development support to emerging developers that are trying to get into real estate development in Grand Rapids and reduce barriers to that opportunity. And then the homeownership is a priority, as I just described. And then we did reserve the right, obviously, with appropriate justification and support from Brownfield Authority and City Commission for strategic projects that would come along to make sort of last-in investments to get an important community project across the finish line. Fifth category here, the last two are really sort of trials and tests that we're talking about here. Parking is an eligible activity in the Brownfield program. It's usually a very significant cost associated with a project when it is included, and we want to evaluate whether we can prioritize traditional eligible costs, demolition, environmental cleanup, those things that don't add value to a project but are still required costs, and then housing and housing affordability. Evaluate opportunities to prioritize that over parking. We recognize that parking sometimes is required, whether that's by a lender or by zoning, and so to the extent it's required by a lender or zoning, we would consider it, but we want to push development of more housing over more parking. And then the last one, again, we want to push projects that are being developed with support from the Brownfield Authority and City Commission to move beyond sort of the minimum requirements and or expectations when it comes to sustainability and engagement. So you obviously just heard about the Development with Us program. We always encourage engagement with our projects, and to the extent we can standardize that, create more predictability, I think we want to move in that direction. And then from a sustainability perspective as well, we have an opportunity to invest in those things. And if we can move projects beyond what's required by code to implement more sustainability elements, whether that's energy efficiency, high efficiency appliances, on-site renewable energy generation is something that MISTA has indicated they're willing to support. So to the extent we can invest in those things and move the needle, we want to do that. The reason that's listed as sort of a test and validate is because we want to be predictable and not, again, set up unintended barriers for projects. So we're going to work collaboratively with applicants to understand what is the right way to implement that, and we'll come back with recommendations as we gather more information. So these are all things that are included in our interim guidelines. So they are out there, they are guidelines, they are flexible, and we're willing to consider whether they need to be changed as time goes on. We did also have the Brownfield Authority consider a few updates to their policies. Because our policies largely reference the law, when the law was changed, then the policies sort of changed by reference. However, we did make a few changes just to accommodate those the legislative changes and the priorities that I've talked through here. So a couple of those, you may be familiar that the sort of standard investment from the Brownfield Authority to date has been that our development agreements fund our program by retaining 10% of annual tax increment revenues to fund the program. So the Brownfield program is funded by tax increment revenues outside of the general fund, and we're going to continue that. However, we also are going to include a 10% annual tax increment financing fee for our revolving fund. So that will allow us to grow that fund that we can use to make strategic investments at a more rapid rate. But it's important to call out that that 10% would not apply to housing projects. So if there's a fully market rate development, or if there's an industrial project or a commercial project, then that would be the standard, 10% for administration of the program, 10% for our revolving fund, and 80% annually for the developer of the project. As you also may be aware, there are opportunities for that fee to be reduced by projects contributing to city strategic priorities. We added one other opportunity for that fee to be reduced by if projects are implementing high efficiency, if they implement a project using high efficiency appliances and electrical, all electric implementation, then they would be able to reduce their fee as well and increase their annual proportion. I already talked through those priorities for the local brownfield revolving fund, but those were adopted into policy as well. And then you'll see on the bottom there the definition of emerging developer. So if we want to provide sort of a strategic level of investment and financial support to emerging developers, it was important to define what those emerging developers, who those individuals are. And so this is the definition that the Brownfield Authority adopted. This was a conversation. Again, Ryan Kilpatrick supported us in this work, trying to get to a place where there's a little bit of flexibility, but also making sure that it's not nominal, that a developer wouldn't just add somebody to their team to sort of qualify, and making sure that there was both risk and reward associated with the emerging developers. So the last thing, just an overview of sort of where we've been and where we're going, what we've accomplished to date. I hope this makes some sense. On the bottom there in the green, you sort of see what we've accomplished, and then moving forward, what needs to be done. I talked through most of the things that are in this first box, although I will also note that before recommending these guidelines and policy proposals to the Brownfield Authority, we also did stakeholder engagement. So we're engaged on a number of projects that are likely to take advantage of this program in the short term. And again, talk through the proposals and make sure we weren't setting up any barriers, that we could work on those projects under these guidelines. And then had the necessary legal review completed. So those guidelines and the policies were adopted by the Brownfield Authority in October. You're also aware we did, through the legislation, create more revenue for the Brownfield Authority, and you did authorize 2 new staff positions via a budget amendment in November, so we're working on that. We are working on application materials. There are some changes to sort of the templates that need to be developed. There's also financial documentation that we need to develop, and we're working on that to the extent we can in the meantime, sort of building this as we go. Some of that we're holding back a little bit because the state has indicated that they're going to provide it. We're still waiting on that from MSHDA, and we, again, don't want to create, if we can use what they provide, that's great. If there are things that we need to refine a little bit, we'll do that, but we don't want to create conflict where we don't need to. And then just some of the things going forward, we're going to need to secure those staff positions to really make sure we can handle projects as they come in, bring them forward in a timely fashion, and do the evaluation that's necessary to make good recommendations. We'll just on an ongoing basis continue to identify opportunities to partner this with other programs to advance the goal of more housing development in Grand Rapids, and then with the goal of predictability and consistency, work to standardize agreements so that everybody knows what they're getting into as soon as possible. That's work that we'll do with the state, potentially with the county as well. Establish our new reporting requirements that are required by law, so everybody knows what the obligations will be going forward. And then as this program sort of builds up, there will be, as you can imagine, monitoring, compliance requirements. We don't have a strong position whether that's something we need to do or whether a third party can do that at this point. But once those monitoring and compliance requirements are determined, then we can evaluate and bring a recommendation on that going forward. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sassi, you want to add anything?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Jono. I want to point out, I think I told him during this process that he had my top PowerPoint slide of 2023 as he was working to explain kind of all of these pieces to our Brownfield Authority. I'll be brief and just say that, yes, the team, that subcommittee coming together, there was a lot of that education and conversation, so it was robust. It wasn't, just like, this is what it's going to be. I think some challenging pieces, but also, as it was stated a number of times, like, how do we make these numbers work? And so I think it was a good reflection of individuals who have some more experience, others that are more representative of different individuals, maybe on the emerging developer side. I also think that this work is clearly in line with things like our master planning process, our strategic priorities, as well as the challenges that we know we have in front of us, particularly, just housing. I think, we will continue to be a city that provides a lot of insight and perspective to MSHDA as a state authority, and work in conjunction and probably provide some good feedback. I also want to say thank you to Jono and the entire department for some of that stakeholder engagement that was happening even before this was approved. And so I hope you get a little time off in December. And this is, I think it just cannot, we've all set it up here, city manager, mayor, other colleagues, that this is significant work. It was done in significant time. I know there was a lot of comments and communication before this process, but I am, I think this is probably like the third time that we're kind of reviewing all these things, and I'm just glad that we're continuing to educate, talk with stakeholders, and ensure that commitment to, emerging developers as well. So I know that's a priority for many of us. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It's evident, I think this is the result of many conversations that happened beyond just this meeting here that I wasn't involved with, but I do think the guidelines seem very thoughtful and balanced. I know we've had a lot of conversations about just the need for housing at every single price point, and the willingness to be flexible, I think, with guidelines to an extent to accommodate where the biggest gaps lie, I think is going to be really important as we do whatever we can to increase more housing within the city. So that coupled with, I think, just the attentiveness to emerging developers, I'm sure there's a lot of people within the community that would love to get involved with creating additional housing supply within the city. And so having some intentional resources and extra, I guess, availability and less barriers, I think, specific to those people is really encouraging too. So just appreciate the work, and I look forward to seeing the impact it'll have.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'll echo those. I know you know that this has been a priority for me for some time, that we were pretty active in supporting these changes at the state level. My question is just related to timeline. I know you know this. I know I've had developers reach out to me eager to use this tool as they look at a potential development, and they're kind of on hold waiting. So I'm curious, when do we anticipate having these final two steps done with the application and the guidelines from the state?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think, to be clear, we would take applications today, and we would bring applications to the Brownfield Authority. What that means is that we'll cobble things together for those projects as we go along and use those as opportunities to develop these agreements. I will say that the two staff positions were authorized. It's going to take some time to obviously recruit, hire, and train, and that's going to allow us to dedicate the resources necessary to this work to really move it along. How long is it going to take? I should have an answer to that. I should have predicted that question. I think, so that next box there, securing the staff, that's next quarter one of 2024, I hope. Identifying opportunities to leverage other programs is going to be an ongoing thing. We're going to have a conversation with the Brownfield Authority tomorrow morning about opportunities to work with community development in the Home Investment Partnership Program to really have a greater impact there, leverage the two programs together. Standardized housing agreement probably is going to be done with the first project. So I had a conversation with the county yesterday. You're aware that they're holding a public hearing on setting up a brownfield authority. So to the extent that we in the county can have the same agreement, I think will be beneficial for developers. So that's something that's going to require some stakeholder engagement, hopefully Q1 of next year as well. Reporting requirements. I guess I'm hopeful that by the end of Q1, we'll have a lot of this accomplished with predictability and consistency. In the meantime, we're not telling anybody to sit tight and wait for us. We will work with you. You just may have to accept a little bit less predictability than you're used to from us if you want to get moving now.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this. Commissioners, any additional questions or comments? All right. Thank you to all of the members of the Brownfield Authority who worked on this and your team, Jono. Appreciate it. All right. Next, maybe I'll turn to City Manager since this was added, and I'm not sure all of us have been familiar with the background. Tell us about this third item, a position addition for Comptroller's Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Consistent with some of the discussions we've had about the impact of economic growth and capital projects, we made a presentation to EDPT back in August talking about the demands in engineering and planning and other departments in the city that would require additional staff. And we had discussions in August and September, I think October and November, just about every month, because you had lots of questions about the return on investment, resulting impact, financial impact, where would the positions be funded from, and so we went through a very deliberative process. Recently, the Comptroller's Office also requested an administrative position, and I became aware that I had the first opportunity to visit with Comptroller staff this past week and suggested that that process, since the request is based on the impact of the economic growth, began here in EDPT like the other positions did. So for that reason, we wanted to begin the conversation today, and the Deputy Comptroller is here to talk about it.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak before you regarding this. As the city manager said, this is a companion piece to that request that has been made. The executive summary is we're looking for this team's support to add a full-time roster spot to the Comptroller's Department in order to deliver capital asset management projects timely. Over the last 7 years, the city has capitalized almost $500 million worth of projects, with about $78 million just this past year. Currently, we only have one individual within the Comptroller Department that is responsible for reviewing the transactions that comprise those. And for each capital asset that is reviewed and capitalized, that only represents about 40% of the total expenditures that have to be reviewed to make sure that they adhere to accounting policies and rules. To add on top of that long time process, there's new regulatory requirements that have come down the last 2 years regarding software-based internet technology arrangements as well as leases that make those fall into the capital projects. We've actually started this process of reviewing our personnel about a year ago, and within our department, we reallocated some resources and some job responsibilities, trying to alleviate the pressure points that arise at the end of the year. But with the recently concluded audit process, we have come to the determination that we cannot continue going as we are with the staff that we are, and that's why we're asking for your support to add an additional roster spot. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. I'll turn to my colleagues first. Commissioners, questions? All right. I guess I have two questions. One, this position would be funded out of general fund.
That is correct.
100% of it would be general fund.
100% of the Comptroller Department is funded from the general fund.
Okay, just wanted to confirm that. And then I'm curious, and maybe you can speak to this, or city manager. And I think we asked the same question last time. Here, we just passed a budget in May, and we're mid-year. what's the urgency of this coming now, mid-year, versus as a part of the budget process recommendations that will be brought forward to the city commission likely in April, so just a few months from now.
Yeah, the urgency from our perspective is we cannot wait another year to get the position funded because of the critical dates of maintaining the capital asset managements. We are getting later and later in wrapping up the information, and it's affecting the ability to finish the annual audit, as well as affecting the ability to get the utility rate study completed on time. So it's to that point where if we have to go through another audit cycle, which in essence we would, because if the position doesn't get funded until July, fiscal 24's audit, we're going to be under the same requirements. And we have a lot of overtime and staff that we're putting in to try to meet these requirements.
And do you have a breakdown of overtime based on the increase in demands? And would adding a position offset the amount that you're spending in overtime right now?
Well, because this position is funded within the APA union, overtime for the individuals that are working on it is not payable. So we have staff that is putting in a lot of extra hours that are not being compensated for it.
Okay. Commissioners, additional questions? Go ahead, Commissioner.
And I guess kind of going off your question, I guess like trying to understand like where the urgency came from, I think, like as opposed to maybe a slow escalation, I guess. And it's a fair question, I think, of why maybe we hadn't heard about this until as of late. But I guess like moving forward then to what would be the best way for us to stay up to date with like the capacity of your team versus the, the staffing needs, I guess. Is that a fair question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little challenging only because we also have our fiscal services, CFO, treasurer. I'm not sure. I may need a little more time to better understand the scope of the work that's being done. I know last time when this came before us for request, we also asked about, are there processes being streamlined? Is there anything that can be automated? Like just getting a better sense of even changes within the department to be more efficient that potentially could assist as well. We have new systems coming online. Is that going to assist with some of the demands on staff or having to do things manually? I feel like I'm getting into the weeds of a department that I don't necessarily oversee. And so I'll probably need a little bit more time to better understand those nuances. City Manager, I don't know if you have any additional input on that.
Just real quickly, I see Commissioner Sassy.
Sorry about that, Commissioner. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, City Manager. I think, sorry, I was coughing a little bit. Some of the awkward pauses, but what I would say is I think to City Manager's point of this coming to us and how we approached the last request mid-year, I think there was, a presentation here at EPT, and then there was some subsequent conversations following that. So I would say from a process, not that there's like a formal process, but John just talked about all the guidelines. So I think we should have some guidelines as well to go back and to look at some of those pieces. Particularly, I wonder, is there any ability to, as we're recruiting for these other positions, is there a way to do this, if this is a decision to move forward? Because I think that was also a question the last time, is not only obviously what is the expense out of the general fund, but also what is the time and how, so if we go into, Jono began this, that was just like last month, right? That was, I don't know when the positions posted and those sorts of pieces, but he's talking Q1, right? So then if we're Q1 and then we're into, or the calendar year, and then we're into July, that timeline is not too far. And so I'd like to also understand what sort of efficiencies could we gain from an HR perspective as it relates to kind of looking collectively for these positions, which are not all the same, but potentially have an impact to a lot of the development, planning, economic development, engineering. So, yeah. Thanks, Commissioner.
Yep.
City Manager?
Yeah, Mayor, and these are all questions that you asked last time that we talked about, and it would be points of needed clarification today. I think I did suggest to Deputy Comptroller, there's a way without making a budget amendment to begin to address the need immediately with existing resources. I believe there's a position that's been vacant multiple years in the Comptroller's office that's been delayed for various reasons, hard to fill, waiting on the implementation of ERP. The department could proceed with a budget substitution to staff that position now, then come back later and do a budget amendment mid-year or during the regular budget process if there's a need to move sooner than this process would allow. So that is always within the discretion of the management within the department.
So if I may respond on two things. In regards to the budget substitution comment, yes, that is a viable option. However, we do have someone currently on acting assignment to that position. So we would need to request city manager approval to keep an individual on that acting assignment, even though the roster spot is budget substituted if we go that route. As to the other point regarding more information, I just want to assure everyone this isn't a rush to judgment scenario. This is something that we've been working within the Comptroller's department for the last 18 months. The error perhaps I made is not bringing it to the city manager's attention, but a lot of these items, Madam Mayor, that you brought up, we've already done internally in the sense that last year at the conclusion of the audit, I'm talking fiscal 22, we said we can't keep doing things this way. We need the departments to assist us in identifying these assets. So we made a concentrated effort during the year to go out to each of the departments, sit down with them about the process and the volume of work that is done in our office after they've identified the capital projects in order for them to do a little bit more of the procedures that we've been doing internally. And throughout that process with this year's audit, we came to the conclusion that that didn't work. So that's why we're asking for the additional position. So we have been making attempt.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. All right, so City Manager, next step, we'll do, as Commissioner Sassi indicated, we'll see if there are additional questions, follow-up conversations, and then anticipate that this would come back. All right. All right, Commissioners, we just have a couple minutes left, and so we do have the updates from our Development Center. We've all been able to look through the packet, see if there's any questions related to those items. Hi.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Manager, and Commissioners. I just wanted to take a time to share our Development Center operational update. As of December 1st, construction continues to trend just over the last calendar year. One of our focuses will be focusing on getting review responses lower through our engagement with plans examiners and also customers that have existing projects that are lying dormant. A couple project highlights are the 2040 Division Avenue Community Youth Center through the Diatribe organization, the 303 Monroe Avenue Lion Square project, the 3201 Burton Street Calvin University athletic facility improvements, and also I'd like to take the time to give Kristen opportunity to discuss some of the projects we're working on with our surveys and new positions.
Any questions on the projects before I pivot to engagement? Okay. So as you may have heard or know, the Development Center did issue a survey, a customer service survey, and we've received actually some pretty great responses. Not all easy to read, but we had more than 3,000 responses to our survey to date. So we will issue a reminder tomorrow that we are going to close that survey on Friday. So I think it'll be out there for about 2.5 to 3 weeks for people to respond. And as I said, thus far, we've had a great engagement. All of the responses are anonymous. And so we plan to use that feedback to build a training module. And so we are currently working working with Jennifer. We meet with her later this week, perhaps early next week, to put together a very specific training program through our HR department. And we are also open to bringing in outside resources if necessary to really focus some training targeted to the concerns that are being raised through this survey. And then also getting some guidance on how to address the person-specific concerns that are being elevated through this process. And I do think when I review the survey results that a lot of the positions that we brought forth to you last month will address a lot of the concerns that are being raised, such as timeliness in Kristen responding to an email. And so having resources to be able to support, just give us additional capacity without having to work at 11 o'clock at night, for example. These additional people will help carry that capacity and address the concerns in being more timely in some responses. That was one I read today, so I thought I'd share that. So anyways, I think that we have good training programs that are coming forth, and also with additional resources, I think we'll be able to address a lot of the concerns that are being raised. So I just thought I'd share that brief update with you since I think it's somewhat timely.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I don't have a question. I appreciate you doing the survey. I know I've had some people reach out to me and say that they appreciate it. Hopefully you're hearing both the things that people appreciate as well as the opportunities where we can grow and improve.
Absolutely.
So hopefully it's balanced because
It is.
your department does some great work as well. There's just a lot going on, and obviously we've heard for some time now that there's a need for increased capacity. So hopefully some recent decisions will help with that.
Yes. Many of the comments are also reaffirming.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay.
And so just do keep us posted. We'll look forward to tracking along with you, both the feedback and opportunities to improve. City Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and I do want to thank the department for the update on all the wonderful things that are going on, but also to add to Kristen's comment on getting customer feedback. I think this is responsive to what we've been hearing, and so in addition to I think the more recent survey, you are already having ongoing survey of applicants, and so we're going to compile those and some other departmental feedback, and I'll be compiling a more holistic customer survey or customer response report and sending that out as well. But I want to thank you for being open to doing that, and as the mayor says, hopefully in addition to the opportunities for improvement, you're also hearing some good feedback on the many wonderful things that we're doing for the community.
Yeah, thanks. All right, commissioners. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen. My question is, and you don't have to tell us right now, but from the 3,000 responses, and like you said, it's going to close on Friday, would it be possible to get a breakdown of like the different kind of sizes of developers? And so as we think about what Jono just presented, and right, because different organizations need different things, and so what might be an expected for, I don't know, sorry, Corewell Health, I'll say Corewell Health, to an emerging developer. I think we need to understand that too and take that into our processing. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We were trying to keep it manageable in terms of what questions we asked, but we did ask about, how frequent do you utilize our services, which I think speaks to some of the scale of the development groups, and then also the types of services that they are relying on, whether it's residential, commercial, et cetera. So we should be able to break that out fairly well, but maybe not quite to the level that you just alluded to.
Whatever level.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I'll end this meeting just by pointing out a few positive things in the packet, since we didn't go through it line by line. But when you look at the development report, there's requests for childcare project, youth centers, housing. So again, a lot of great work happening to do what we can to support these projects that we know meet the needs of individuals and families in our community. And they are located throughout the entire city in all 3 wards, which is good. So thank you for that. With that, I'll call this meeting to a close, and commissioners will be back here in about 30 minutes.